我想我要特别介绍我们第一位那个主持哈，因为我们今天很荣幸，居然还有另外一位国策顾问，那就是我们这个伊庆春老师哈。我们因为他在中央研究院做了好多的研究，然后也对我们这些，他是做研究，可是对我们这些教学界还有教育界哈都非常大的支持。那所以我很高兴，我们就邀请他来做我们第一场的主持人，谢谢。
谢谢。大家早。今天非常荣幸可以来到这个地方来参与这个盛会啊，所以首先先谢谢这个各个筹备委员会的同工，还有各位贵宾。那么今天我们的第一场的演讲的主题演讲者呢是 Dr. Stanley， 他是丹佛大学这个婚姻与家庭研究中心的共同负责人，也是该校的这个研究教授。那么他个人的这个研究呢非常的广泛而且深入，大致可以分为2个部分。它的第一个部分的研究呢，就是有关于它叫做 PrEP Program， 主要就是有关于预防还有关系加强方面的一些做法。那么这个 program， 我看他的这个自己的介绍当中呢，至少可以看得到，在过去30年来的努力啊，他们大概主要是希望能够预防婚姻中的问题，包括离婚或者是婚姻中的一些负面的一些看法。然后此外，这个 program 本身也是一个婚姻教育的一个教材。那么这个 program 建立之后，我想很难得的，他们就在美国各个社区，甚至得到了他们的一些财务的支持。从2006年开始，在美国的军队中大量的使用。那他们最高兴的是，近年来他们又得到一笔钱，然后可以开始在做这个 program。他们实行出来之后，它到底成效如何？那我想这是我们台湾常常都说应该要评估。可是你 develop 出来一个 program， 到底它成效如何，需要有一些比较具体的一些评估。那另外一方面，我想在座各位如果曾经听过Dr. Stanley 演讲，上一次来到台湾会知道他对于婚姻承诺这个概念有很深的承诺与研究啊。那么他不仅出版书籍，而且近年来他说他花很多的力气在有关于这个。叫做什么？我们叫 romantic relations， 我们要怎么翻成罗曼关系？好像怪怪的哦，意思就亲密关系吧。那么亲密关系当中，这个男女之间他们彼此的这个发展的情况，所以为了要达到这个目的呢，他近年来他开始从2007年开始，他有个长期的追踪研究，主要是针对未婚的couples， 还有一些同居。我们知道在西方国家同居的比例比我们台湾高得多。那么他为什么要研究这些还没有进入婚姻关系的年轻人的一些问题呢？我想他最主要是想要知道有哪一些因素会导致他们对于承诺的发展愿意做一个承诺，这样子讲。换句话说，有些人为什么无法做出长期的承诺？那么我相信这个对他作为一个把一个建构一个婚姻承诺的理论有非常重要的一个关键。那此外，在这样子做的时候，他其实从社会学或社会科学的一些研究来讲，他已经往前另辟一条途径。换句话说，以前在社会学研究中，我们常谈到的是一个选择的效果，可他在这里谈到的是未必是选择的效果，可能有一些我们叫做什么 risk factor， 是不是叫危机因素，会导致你无法在这个亲密关系中有更进一步的发展。所以，而且对我个人来讲，我非常高兴 ，Dr. Stanley 是在做这个年轻的青少年的一些亲密的关系，这跟我过去10年来的研究方向是非常一致的。要看到我们一个，尤其像在台湾社会，一个青年人的成长，我们也知道台湾的婚前的性关系愿意承认的发展，大概有到20岁的时候，大概有30%几。那么我们的年轻同事，这个统计好的还可以算一算，发现，男孩子这个碰轰的程度大概有4倍，女生跟实际的程度比较相近，所以这可见很多东西其实都蛮相近的。所以他在这里可以看到， 同样这个年轻人他在社会中成长，最后有的进入婚姻，有的没有进入婚姻，在这种多元化的发展轨迹中，哪一些机制跟因素在影响？所以我想我们可以看得到 Dr. Stanley 在过去这么多年30多年的努力中，他出版了许多的书籍，包括已经翻译成中文的一些书籍，例如这个承诺的力量如何这叫做 fighting for， 叫做如何抵抗或者是如何为你的婚姻来尽个力。另外对从于学术研究工作者来讲，非常佩服他在许许多多一流的这个家庭与婚姻方面的期刊出版许许多多的论文，例如包括很有名的家庭心理、家庭关系、家庭过程，或者是婚姻与家庭等等，还有他的治疗方面的这些 journals。另外 Dr. Stanley 他因为他研究的关系，他也担任美国的州还有联邦还有一些私人企业的顾问，那么协助他们来推动家庭政策以及家庭的一些相关的计划。那我自己看到最感动的是，通常我们做这些事，他的受惠者往往是社会中比较富裕的一些人，所以他们有特别花一些努力，针对低收入户以及常常低收入也就伴随着一些比较高的压力的一些个人或团体，在整个美国当中他们来努力。所以我想我们今天的这个大会第一场演讲，请他来跟我们讲这个主题的演讲是非常非常合适的，让我们用热烈的掌声来欢迎 Dr. Stanley。
Well, good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I expect many of you are delighted that you'll hear translation of my talk. I first want to thank everybody. I won't go through a long list of names, but I know it's a lot of people, and you've seen them up here, and you know who they are, who are involved in making this conference happen. This is a very impressive event. And it takes a lot of effort to make such an event like this happen, and really thank everybody that's been involved. And thank you especially for Dr. Huang and Dr. Lin for bringing me out here again. I appreciate that. I'm going to really focus my talk today on things that we have been doing and trying in the United States. So I'm going to give this talk as sort of a review of things that have happened in the United States in the last 13 years, and I will try to point out specific lessons from the experiences that we've had in the United States that maybe could be useful to some of the efforts here. There's some ways in which what you're doing here I think is further along than what we're doing there, and there's other ways in terms of things that we do there are further along from here. But I'm happy to share with you things that I think have been real challenges or concerns as we do this sort of work in the U.S. so that, okay, the question arises, and you've thought a lot about it here. It's been raised already this morning in the comments that have been made to start. Why does this kind of work matter? Why do we care? And I'll tell you the way that I've thought about the answer for some time in the U.S., which is to think about this large storm as an example. You have many storms out here in the Pacific that are probably larger than the ones that we have in the North Atlantic. But there was a very famous storm in the North Atlantic in 1991. They ended up making a movie about it. And a meteorologist actually called it the perfect storm because these three different things, these three large systems collided to make this giant storm that caused lots of damage and was a very dangerous storm because of the way these things came together. And I think our societies at this point face a very similar kind of perfect storm, that there's things that have come together now that create a particular challenge and threat, really, a threat to society as we know it and stability of culture and families. The way I think about this in the U.S. is that because of the way families have changed, because of divorce, because in the U.S. of non-marriage, of children born out of wedlock, and a couple other things that I'll comment on specifically, we have perhaps more people than ever before in the young generations who have insecurities about attachment in family, that they don't feel secure about attachments with others, they don't feel that families are secure or that families are really likely to make it go for the long term. As was mentioned by Mr. Pai in the survey from the think tank, same thing that we observe in the US and in most industrialized cultures, people have lost confidence in marriage. This doesn't change the fact that people want lifelong, lasting love. People want stability. People want marriage. People want it to work. But people are less confident than they've ever been before that they can make it work or that it will work out for them because they've seen an incredible amount of families not working and coming apart. These changes are happening at the same time, I think, in most of our societies where we're seeing a dismantling of the kind of traditions and protective structures and pathways that people used to take fairly consistently in terms of how families would develop, in terms of developing commitment and then having a child and then really raising that child together. Things like that are not to be taken for granted anymore. That's not so much the way things happen. And the pattern has not been very clear for the next generation. So in some ways, the younger generation now, I think, has more issues and insecurities about attachment, even as in our societies, we have made it much harder than ever before to really develop a secure commitment in relationships and to make them work. In the United States, the governments have paid, state and federal, increasing attention to services to strengthen marriages and two-parents families. I don't want to imply, though, that despite the increased attention, there is still lots of debate and disagreement even about whether the government should do that or how the government should do that. In some ways, I think you have a better chance here of having real unity about the goal than what we've had in the United States. Even though while most people want marriage and they want marriage to last, for example, in the United States, the government is very reluctant to even talk about marriage, to do much to strengthen marriage, and increasingly, even if they continue some of these efforts, they probably won't use the marriage word. They'll just talk about relationships and family stability. So I'm going to give an overview of some of the history and some of the lessons from these efforts in the hopes that it will help in things that you're doing here. First off, a little bit of what was before the last 13 years, because I'm going to talk most about the last 13 years. One of the things that we saw in the United States, and this is true in other countries as well, I'm just focusing on names from the US here, is starting about 40 years ago, a real increased emphasis among scholars to think about ways to strengthen marriage, to use different kinds of strategies in relationship education to help couples be more likely to succeed in their marriage. And those are some of the notable people in the history there. And my colleague and I, Howard Markman, and we've been working together since 1977, which, as you can tell, was when I was 3 years old. I'll use these terms interchangeably through my talk. If I mention CRE or MRE, I'm talking about couples-focused or relationship education in general, designed to help couples strengthen their relationships. At the same time that there was more interest in the academic world, or from academics actually, to work on strengthening marriages, there was a real increase in churches in the last decades in the United States to increase the emphasis on at least premarital education for couples that were coming to them to get married. And I don't believe these efforts were connected. The academic efforts and the efforts in churches, I don't believe, had any relationship to each other. I think they both grew out of a recognition that the divorce rate had greatly increased and that people were increasingly anxious about marriage, avoiding marriage, struggling in marriage. And churches and other religious organizations became very interested in trying to prepare people more for doing well in marriage. So you can see, and this is one large survey across 4 states that gives an example of this, whereas back many years ago, only 7% or so would say that they had had any kind of preparation for marriage when they came to their religious organization to get married. As recently into the late 1990s, that percentage had come up to 44. And I don't know if it's even higher now or not. It's probably not a lot higher now. But that you can see that real growth in that emphasis within religious institutions that were involved in people's weddings to try to help prepare them not just for the wedding, but for the marriage, which is much more important, of course, than the wedding. In 1998 and forward, so there was an increasingly what you could identify as a marriage movement, a marriage education movement, some increased discussion of policy. One of the conferences that became very popular from around 1998 forward was the Smart Marriages Conference, which grew into a pretty big event. I think the largest attendance for a couple of years in the later, into this millennium. Maybe 2,000 people or so who were all passionate and interested in helping couples, people coming to these events. Increased emphasis at the National Council of Family Relations, which is not a government group, by the way. It's a private sort of research, policy-oriented conference and a group that publishes journals. They placed an increasing emphasis in this period of time on family life education. A new organization started when Smart Marriages discontinued called NARMI, which stands for the National Association of Relationship and Marriage Education, trying to pick up some of the emphasis. A quick comment, because this conference here, what you're doing, is a very important kind of conference, because these sort of meetings establish a gathering place for people that all have a similar concern. Very different backgrounds, very different specific interests and life experiences, but a similar concern about marriage and family and what can be done. These are very important because they provide a place for people to come together and meet other people and learn from other people. So I think this is a wonderful thing, and I hope you can do it every year. And continue to do it. The one that discontinued that was really large in the US really mostly just discontinued because it was a one-person thing. It was a woman named Diane Soley who really conceived of the idea, and she made it happen, and it had great success. But when she decided she was not interested in doing that any longer in terms of the energy and the financial risk, it stopped. Here, I think you'll have a much broader sort of basis of people to try to maintain this kind of effort. The U.S. government entered this whole field in a large way around, I should really say 2002. And it's unclear now for how long that will continue, but there's been a lot of activity through different grants, and I'll describe that in a little bit here. The big change in terms of the law, it's interesting to watch what happens in law in terms of government and how that reflects priorities and what might happen. The biggest change here for the US happened in 1996 when there was a very important change in the welfare law, when it became welfare, which had traditionally been people very, very poor, get into the welfare system, and many times would be there for the rest of their lives. And then multi-generationally, the children would start out in the system, and it became sort of a lifetime sort of path for many people. And they changed it, you'll see the word temporary, they changed it to try to make it more temporary, to try to move people to work, to try to move people off of that deep dependence upon the government. With some success. This change in the law was a very successful major innovation in government policy, which you usually don't see. That's a rare thing. And it was an agreement between both liberals and conservatives to try to make these changes. One of the things that got less attention was, as part of this law, people recognized that poverty and multi-generational poverty was very much associated with families falling apart and families not forming and children not being raised by their own two parents. So some of those that formed this law worked in a great emphasis foundationally to the goal of increasing two-parent families, to talk more about marriage as well, and to really emphasize that, because it was very clear by this point to researchers that despite all the things that researchers and policy people argue about, children do best when they're raised by their own two parents. There's just no doubt about that. There's exceptions. We all know there's many exceptions to that. There's single parents that do a heroic and wonderful job, and there's two parents that stay together and are not doing a very good job for any number of reasons. But on average, from the standpoint of government policy, if you had many more children being raised by their own two parents, you would have less poverty, you would have less crime, you would have less of all kinds of things that the government has to take care of on the other end of the spectrum. Some people argued, should the government be involved? Why should the government be involved in things like marriage and things like family instability? And the logical argument was that government's already heavily involved. Government's heavily involved in the other end, in all these different kinds of services and problems and issues for the culture and for society. The need for foster care. I don't know if that translates well to you. In America, that's all the children who are no longer being able to be cared for by either of their parents, that are then being taken care of another family that might receive support from the government for helping to do that. Child abuse and neglect rates are much higher when a child is not being raised by his or her own two parents. The divorce courts and all the costs there. Increasingly non-marital births. I think this is probably similar here. In the United States now, most first births, even to women in their 20s, are not to married women. So the number of children, first births, being born to married women in the United States has gone steadily downward. And if you look from the age of 30 under that, most first births are to unmarried women. In fact, let me comment on that for a second. A lot of times, liberals and conservatives argue about these things in the United States about whether that's a problem or why that's a problem. And the main reason why that's a problem, and it relates very much to marriage, but it actually relates more fundamentally to an important point about commitment. Many times when couples who are unmarried are having a child, they may not even have decided to have a child. They are having a child sort of by accident. They've slid into it. Sliding versus deciding is a phrase I use for lots of kinds of things about how we do families now. They're sliding into having a child rather than really deciding together that we want to have a child. And one of the consequences of that is here you have a couple that's having a child. They can make a baby, but they haven't even decided whether they have a future together. They haven't decided whether they even want to be together, much less whether they want to have a family together and raise a family together and raise this child together. So compared to married couples having a children, you, at least with the married couple, you have a clear commitment to the future. And if there's a child, there's usually been a very clear commitment to have a family. Whether or not they plan that particular child, there's a commitment to be a family. With many unmarried couples having children, it's not that they're bad parents or that they're bad people in any way. They're not. They're fine people. And many of them are great parents. But they hadn't decided together that we're committed to being parents, that we're committed to being a family. So their odds of breaking up before the child is 2 or 5 or whatever statistic you want to choose are much, much greater. And then that child will experience many more relationships among their parents. Let's say the child is with his or her mother. The mother starts dating somebody else. Maybe they move in together for 9 months. And then that relationship ends. Well, that child's attached now to that male also. And then that relationship ends, and then there's another love relationship. The woman becomes, could be the father too. It's just more often the mother that has the child, at least in the US. Falls in love with somebody else. And maybe that relationship lasts a couple years, and the child attaches to that person. Or maybe doesn't attach to that person. The child's learning much by the age of 5 about how unstable family relationships are and how insecure it is to have a romantic relationship. And those lessons are going to stay in the mind long term. One of the things that happened under this act is states had a lot of ability, the different 50 states in the United States and the several territories that we have. They had a lot of flexibility to spend pretty much money related to their TANF budgets to try to strengthen families, to try to make more two-parent families more likely to stay together, to try to strengthen existing married couples, unmarried couples having children. And very little was done with this from 1996 to 2001. Oklahoma started to do a lot. I'll say more about Oklahoma in 1999. Some other states early on tried some things, Utah and Florida. Utah still does pretty much. But most states ignored their ability under this law to try to do anything. Now a number of other states have done some more things, but initially many did not do anything. Now in Oklahoma, Governor Keating at the time was the governor of the state in 1999. He commissioned a study by economists at the state universities to study why Oklahoma was lagging a bit behind other states in really being able to get things going financially. The question really was, why is Oklahoma struggling financially? Why aren't we growing as fast as some other states? And the economists came back with many different kinds of answers about how different things were affecting Oklahoma. But one of the most important answers that they came back with said, we have very high rates of family instability. We have very high rates of divorce, very high rates of children being born out of wedlock, and this affects the whole economy. This not only takes many costs out of government to support the families that aren't able to support themselves so well, but it also affects how well people do in education, it affects how well people are able to keep and maintain jobs, to get better jobs. Family instability affects everything else, including an economy to a great degree. And he started, along with his cabinet secretary, started a marriage initiative, or the idea of a marriage initiative, with the initial goal to reduce the divorce rate by 33%. Now I'll say in a few minutes why that maybe wasn't the best goal in terms of a marker to express, but it expressed the desire politically by the state to do something different, to really change this rampant instability. And Oklahoma did use money from the TANF funds under their discretion from the change in the federal law to do a lot. One of the things that was very important in how they did things in Oklahoma is they had strategic leadership. They had very good leaders. You can never underestimate the power and the importance of having good leaders. Without leaders who really see the vision for something and see and think well strategically, it's very hard to get things done. And in the Department of Human Services, they had a man running that who was very visionary, a man named Howard Hendrick, very wise, really smart thinking about what was going on in these systems. And they hired an external company named Public Strategies, which is headed up by a woman named Mary Myrick, who's brilliant, really brilliant in terms of strategy and thinking about how to help families. These two people and all of their colleagues and associates really enacted this idea and have done an amazing, far beyond what any other state in the country has been able to do on so many different levels. And one of the lessons learned from this is whether it's a public or a private entity or however one structures the leadership, you really need that strategic thought. You need energy and initiative and motivation because there are many barriers to doing this kind of work. There are many things that will get in the way, many challenges, many rules, many cultural obstacles. And to work through those things and to figure out how to work those requires much innovation in terms of making things happen. So Oklahoma was able to do a lot because they thought very well. They developed training in marriage and relationship education services, mostly focused on our program PREP, but different variations in different sectors, different groups, for couples, for unmarried couples. I'll say more about the list in a minute. And this was a very important and large public-private effort. So there was government money, and there was government employees involved. There was this private company hired by the government involved with many employees under the government contract to try to organize and make things happen. And they also were very successful in getting volunteers across the state to be involved in things like providing marriage and relationship education classes for couples. Many people were interested in helping in this work, so much of that part of the labor was provided for free by volunteers who really wanted to be involved so they could focus more of their money and expenditures on helping to organize that and helping those people do their work. There's a lot of other places where it wasn't volunteers, by the way, too, and they did very effective things. So they've had classes for marriages. They've had, very importantly, in most of their high schools, relationship education now is a part of what they learn in high school. They talk about marriage. They talk about aspirations for what people want. How do you get there? What's risky? What's not? They'll bring these things up in these classes in high school and try to get to people earlier on before they've made some of the mistakes that they could make that would make it very hard to get back on track in terms of education and family. Even programs for couples in the transition and parenthood, programs in prisons and correctional settings, especially for people that are about to get out. Because in corrections, they know very well that how people do with their family and those that they're going back to when they leave has a huge amount to do with how they're going to do in terms of whether they're going to repeat their problem with crime. If they're integrated with the family, if they're able to strengthen those family ties, it's going to have a bigger effect on whether or not the prison is going to see them again. Very important. Programs for foster and adoptive parents, for single parents, many other services. I'm just, I could spend all day describing different things that they've tried. Some things that they tried and failed, and many things they've tried and succeeded at. That happens, by the way. If you try many things and you're very innovative, you will fail at many things. But you will also find the things that work. That's how you find the things that work. And Oklahoma has failed at a number of things, but really learned from many others and succeeded. At this point, they've provided some sort of relationship education service to over 335,000 people in different settings, as I've mentioned on the list. Another thing they did in Oklahoma, and you're doing a variation of this here, which is very nice to see, is they started in, I think this was 2000, yeah, they started in 2000 by every year having a group of nationally recognized scholars in family and research and marriage to come in and give the marriage initiative input and advice based on research. And they have had this group, which is a very distinguished group. The first two are very noted sociologists who have passed on now, but this group, the core group, and now it's expanded to some other scholars that are involved. We go there for 2 days every year in December and talk about what they've been doing. We all talk about the latest in our research. We talk about how the research might affect what they're doing in their next strategies, or how they might revise or design differently what they're doing. It's a very important, very valuable, and powerful meeting. It's also fun. It's very nice. Back to this, I'll make a quick comment about this. The goal to reduce divorce by 1/3 wasn't a really good goal. The researchers wouldn't have expressed that goal. That'd be too ambitious. In fact, you would only have to reduce divorce or strengthen child stability in families by a little bit to have it be very financially worthwhile for a society and for a state.